The day I stood waiting at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, my palms sweating despite the cool autumn air, was the day my mother stepped back into my life after 15 years of silence. But when she wrapped her arms around me and whispered into my ear, "Liam, I know about Noah, and the real reason I left isn't what you think," I felt the ground shift beneath me like an earthquake I never saw coming. We pulled apart slowly, and I stared at her face, older now with fine lines around her eyes that spoke of years filled with stories I had never heard. Her hair was streaked with gray, but the gentle curve of her smile was the same one I remembered from childhood bedtime stories. "Mom," I managed, my voice cracking like I was still that scared 17-year-old kid. "It's been so long." "Why now?" She squeezed my hand as we walked toward the baggage claim, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm of angry bees. "Your father passed away last month, Liam. Heart attack." I thought it was finally time. Her eyes darted away from mine, focusing on the carousel instead, and I knew there was more buried beneath those simple words. The drive back to my apartment in the Loop was filled with awkward small talk about her flight from the tiny Iowa town where she had been living, the traffic on I-90, and how the city had changed since she last visited. I kept glancing at her in the passenger seat, trying to reconcile this woman with the mother who had packed a single suitcase and disappeared the morning after I came out. Noah was waiting at home, probably pacing the living room the way he always did whenever I was anxious about something big. I hadn't told him much about the reunion, just that my mom was coming and I needed to handle the first meeting alone. When we arrived at the modern high-rise building with its glass lobby shining under the streetlights, Noah opened the door before I could even fish out my keys. He stood there in his favorite navy sweater, tall and steady with dark hair falling slightly over his forehead and those kind green eyes that had grounded me through every storm. "Mrs. Thompson, it's so good to finally meet you," he said warmly, extending his hand. But Mom surprised us both by pulling him into a full hug instead. "Call me Elena, please. And I've heard so much about you, Noah. You make my son smile in a way I never thought possible." My stomach twisted into knots. How did she know about him? In the handful of careful emails we had exchanged over the years, I had never once mentioned Noah or the life we had built together. As we settled into the living room with its big windows overlooking the river, the tension thickened like fog rolling off Lake Michigan. Mom sipped the tea I poured for her, her eyes moving between us with a softness that felt both comforting and terrifying. "You two look happy together," she said quietly. "I'm glad you found someone who loves you for exactly who you are, Liam." That's when the realization slammed into me. She knew I was gay. She had known all along. The night I came out at 17, Dad had exploded in the kitchen, his voice echoing off the walls as he demanded to know how I could do this to the family. Mom had stayed silent, tears streaming down her face, and the next morning she was gone. I had spent 15 years believing my sexuality had driven her away, that I was the reason our family shattered. Now here she sat in my living room, accepting it like it was the most natural thing in the world. But her words from the airport kept echoing in my head. There was a hidden truth, and it was about to unravel everything. Over a simple dinner of takeout Thai food spread across the coffee table, Mom began to open up in fragments. "Your father was a difficult man, Liam. Strong in his faith, strong in his pride. When he found your diary that summer, the one where you wrote about your feelings for that boy from the soccer team, he threatened to send you away to one of those conversion places. I begged him not to. I left the next day because I thought if I was gone, he would focus on keeping the family name clean and let you finish high school without that hanging over you." I dropped my fork onto the plate with a clatter. "You left because of me? To protect me?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, years of buried anger rising like bile. Noah reached over and placed a steady hand on my knee, but I could feel the tremor in his fingers. Mom nodded, tears glistening in her eyes under the warm lamp light. "But there's more, sweetheart. I stayed away because I was convinced you hated me for abandoning you. Until Noah reached out to me last month after your father passed. Noah's face went pale, his hand freezing on my knee. Elena, I was going to tell you everything tonight. I swear. The room spun around me. Noah had contacted my mother behind my back? The man I had trusted with every piece of my heart had gone around me to bridge a gap I wasn't even sure I wanted bridged. The betrayal hit like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. You what? You talked to her without telling me? After everything we've been through? The argument that followed blurred into raised voices and hurt stares. Mom tried to mediate, but I was already grabbing my coat, needing air, needing space from the two people who had just upended my entire understanding of the last 15 years. As I stormed out into the chilly Chicago night, the city lights blurring through angry tears, I wondered how a single reunion could crack the foundation of the life I had fought so hard to build. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the secrets that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about love, family, and who I really was. The streets of downtown Chicago felt colder than usual as I walked without direction, my breath forming clouds in the night air. Neon signs from bars and restaurants reflected off the wet pavement, but nothing could distract me from the storm raging inside my head. Noah had reached out to Mom. The one person who was supposed to be my safe harbor had sailed into waters I had deliberately kept off limits. I pulled out my phone and stared at his text from earlier that day. Whatever happens, I'm here for you. The words now tasted like lies. By the time I returned to the apartment 2 hours later, the lights were dimmed and Mom had retreated to the guest room. Noah sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He looked up when I closed the door, his green eyes filled with regret that almost made me soften. Almost. Liam, let me explain, he started, standing slowly. After your dad died, I found some old letters your mom had written to him that were never sent. They were in the box of things you kept from Iowa. She was begging him to let her come back, saying she only left to protect you. I couldn't watch you carry that pain alone anymore. So I tracked down her address and wrote to her. I thought if she knew you were happy, really happy with me, it might heal something. I sank into the armchair across from him, the leather cool against my back. You had no right, Noah. That was my past, my wound. You turned it into your project without asking. The words came out harsher than I meant, but the hurt was too fresh. He nodded, running a hand through his dark hair. I know. I was scared you'd say no, and I hated seeing you pretend the hole in your heart didn't exist. But I never meant to betray you. We talked until the city outside began to wake, voices low to avoid waking Mom. He told me about the emails they exchanged, how Mom had cried when she learned I was a successful marketing director at a downtown firm and how Noah had become my anchor after college. I listened, the anger slowly cracking into something more complicated, a mix of gratitude and resentment. By morning, Mom emerged from the guest room looking tired but determined. I don't want to cause more pain, she said over coffee. But there are things your father never told you, Liam. Things I kept hidden even from myself for too long. That day we drove to the small park by the lake where Noah and I had our first real date years ago. The leaves were turning gold and red, crunching under our feet as we walked the path. Mom shared stories I had never heard. How Dad's rigid church views had poisoned their marriage long before I came out. How he had monitored my every move after finding the diary. I wrote you letters every year on your birthday, she confessed, pulling a small bundle from her purse. But I never mailed them because I was afraid he'd find out and make things worse for you. I took the letters with shaking hands, the paper worn from years of handling. Noah stayed a few steps behind, giving us space, but I could feel his presence like a quiet promise. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the water, Mom turned to me. Seeing you with Noah, so open and loved, it's everything I prayed for when I left. But the truth is bigger than that, son. Your father wasn't just angry about your sexuality. He was hiding something of his own. Before she could finish, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Alex. Dude, call me ASAP. Something's blowing up online about you. My heart dropped. I opened the link he sent, and there it was, a post on a local community forum from someone I barely remembered from high school, outing me with old photos of Noah and me at a Pride event last summer. The comments were already piling up, some supportive, others vicious. Mom saw my face and reached for my arm. Liam, what's wrong? Noah stepped closer, reading over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. The misunderstanding from last night suddenly felt small compared to this new storm. Someone had betrayed my privacy, and now the secret I had guarded so carefully was public. I looked at Noah, wondering if his well-intentioned reach to Mom had somehow triggered this chain reaction. The doubt crept in like poison, making me question every decision that had led us here. That evening back at the apartment, the three of us sat in heavy silence. Mom offered to leave if it would help, but I shook my head. No, you're here now. We face this together. Yet inside, the psychological weight pressed down. Actions had consequences, and my choice to hide for so long was colliding with the truth Noah had tried to force into the light. As night fell, I lay awake beside Noah, his steady breathing the only calm in the chaos, wondering how much more my heart could take before everything broke. The online post spread faster than I could contain it. By the next morning, my work email inbox was flooded with messages from colleagues, some offering awkward support, others asking thinly veiled questions about the pictures. At the marketing firm where I had climbed the ladder for 8 years, the whispers followed me into the conference room during our team meeting. My boss pulled me aside afterward, his face professional but eyes uneasy. Liam, the company supports diversity, but this kind of attention. Let's keep things low-key for now. The subtle pressure felt like a hand around my throat, squeezing the air of acceptance I had worked so hard to breathe. Noah met me for lunch at our usual cafe near the river. His face lined with worry he tried to hide behind a smile. Alex called me too. He says the guy who posted it was that old teammate from high school, the one who always made those jokes. I can talk to him if you want. I shook my head, stabbing at my salad without appetite. This isn't your fight, Noah. You already did enough by bringing Mom back. The words slipped out sharper than intended, reopening the wound from the night before. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand away. The misunderstanding was growing roots, turning into something darker. Back home, Mom was in the kitchen attempting to cook my favorite childhood meal, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, the smell filling the apartment like a time machine. She turned when I entered, wiping her hands on a towel. I saw the post, honey. I'm so sorry. But this doesn't change who you are or how proud I am. Her acceptance should have felt like healing, but it only amplified the questions swirling inside me. Why had she stayed silent for 15 years if she was so proud? I sat at the counter and finally asked the question that had haunted me since the airport. If you knew Dad was the problem, why didn't you fight for me? Why disappear? She sat down slowly, her eyes distant. Because fighting meant risking you. He had connections in our church community. One word from him and you could have been pulled out of school, sent somewhere I couldn't reach. I chose exile so you could have a chance at normalcy until you could leave on your own terms. It was the hardest decision of my life. The revelation landed heavy, shifting the narrative I had built in my head. Dad wasn't just traditional. He had wielded power like a weapon. Mom's sacrifice, once seen as abandonment, now looked like the ultimate act of love. Yet the psychological toll on her showed in the way her hands trembled as she spoke. Noah joined us for dinner, the table tense but civil. We talked about safer topics, my job, his work as a graphic designer, but the undercurrent of betrayal lingered. Later that night, after Mom went to bed, Noah and I stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the city lights. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly, leaning on the railing. I thought bringing her here would give you closure. Instead, it opened every wound. I turned to him, the wind ruffling his dark hair, and for the first time in days I saw the fear in his eyes, the the fear of losing me. In that moment, the love we had built over 7 years felt both fragile and unbreakable. I pulled him into a hug, the kind that said more than words could, but deep down the doubt remained. Had his decision been love or control? The next few days blurred into a series of difficult conversations. Alex came over one evening, my straight best friend since college who had always been my biggest ally. "Man, this sucks," he said, handing me a beer. "But you've got Noah and now your mom. Lean on that." His support felt genuine, yet I wondered how long before the rifts in my social circle widened. Mom suggested we visit Dad's grave in Iowa, a 4-hour drive that could bring answers or more pain. I agreed, mostly because refusing felt like running again. The road trip started quietly, the 3 of us in my SUV with Noah driving. As cornfields gave way to rolling hills, Mom shared more fragments of the past. Letters Dad had written her after she left, full of anger but also hidden guilt. "He knew his views were tearing us apart," she said softly. But admitting it would have meant admitting something about himself he couldn't face. The words hung in the air, hinting at deeper secrets. Noah glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. The turning point was approaching. I could feel it in my bones, a moment that would either bind us closer or tear us apart forever. When we pulled into the small cemetery under gray skies, the headstone simple and cold, I knelt and placed flowers down, the weight of years pressing on my chest. Mom stood beside me, silent tears falling. Noah waited at the car, giving us space, but his presence was the anchor I didn't know I still needed. That night in a roadside motel, the truth began to crack open wider. Mom sat on the edge of the bed and finally said the words that changed everything. "Your father wasn't just against your sexuality, Liam. He was hiding his own struggles with it. He had an affair with a man from church when you were little. I found out and confronted him the night you came out. That's why he reacted so violently. He saw himself in you and couldn't bear it." The room went still. Noah's hand found mine across the space between chairs. The hidden truth wasn't just about me. It was about the man who had shaped my fear of being gay. The psychological impact hit like a wave, forcing me to confront how much of my life had been built on someone else's shame. I stood up, pacing, anger and grief mixing until I couldn't breathe. Noah pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in days, I let myself cry. Mom watched with quiet understanding, her sacrifice now illuminated in a new light. But as the night deepened, a new fear crept in. If this truth spread, what would it do to the fragile peace we were building? The drive back to Chicago felt heavier than the trip down, each mile carrying the weight of revelations that refused to settle. Mom sat in the passenger seat this time, staring out at the flat landscape, while Noah and I took turns driving in silence broken only by occasional radio songs. The secret about Dad's affair explained so much, the rage, the distance, the way he had pushed me toward sports and church activities like they could cure something he feared in himself. Yet knowing it didn't erase the years of self-doubt it had planted in me. I glanced at Noah's profile as he drove, his strong hands on the wheel, and wondered how I had ever questioned his intentions. His quiet strength had been my constant through college doubts, through my first job struggles, through the quiet nights when family expectations still haunted me. Back in the apartment, the online storm had quieted somewhat, but the damage lingered. A colleague had unfriended me on social media, and my boss scheduled a vague check-in meeting for Monday. Societal pressure wasn't dramatic fireworks. It was these small cuts that bled slowly. Alex stopped by again, this time with pizza, trying to lighten the mood. "You guys look like you survived a war," he joked, but his eyes showed real concern. "Whatever you need, I'm here." No judgment. His loyalty felt like a lifeline, yet I sensed the friendship could fracture if the pressure mounted. Friendships in the gay community often carried extra weight, tested by the outside world in ways straight friends rarely understood. That weekend, Noah suggested we all go to the Art Institute, a place that had always brought us peace. Walking through the galleries with Mom, pointing out paintings that reminded her of Iowa skies, felt almost normal. She paused in front of a large canvas depicting two figures reaching toward each other across a divide. "This reminds me of us," she said softly, reaching across years of silence. Noah smiled at me over her shoulder, and in that moment the romantic pull between us resurfaced, a reminder of why we had fought so hard to build our life together. Later, alone in a quiet corner of the museum, he pulled me close. "I love you, Liam. No secrets, no more hiding. Whatever comes next, we face it as equals." His kiss was soft, full of promise, and for the first time since the airport, the happiness we had shared felt within reach again. But happiness is fragile in the face of truth. Monday morning brought the turning point I had feared. My boss called me into his office, closing the door with a click that echoed like a gavel. "Liam, the firm's image is important. Clients have seen the post. We think a short leave might be best while things cool down." The words landed like a betrayal from an institution I had given my best years to. I walked out numb, the city streets blurring as I headed home early. Mom met me at the door, her face etched with worry. "What happened?" When I told her, she hugged me tightly. "This is exactly what I tried to shield you from. But you're stronger now. You have Noah. You have me." Noah arrived home from his studio an hour later, sensing the shift immediately. "Leave? They can't do that." His voice rose with protective anger, the kind that had always made me feel safe. But when I suggested maybe it was time to consider moving to a more accepting city, he surprised me by shaking his head. "No, we don't run. But I can sacrifice the freelance projects I'm tied to here. We can rebuild somewhere new if that's what you need." His willingness to uproot his career for me was the sacrifice I hadn't expected, a decision that spoke volumes about his love. Yet it also sparked a new conflict in my mind. Was I worth that kind of loss? The psychological battle raged inside me, forcing growth I wasn't sure I was ready for. The following days brought more confrontations. A distant relative from Iowa called Mom, having seen the post, demanding to know what kind of family we were raising. The phone call turned heated, voices carrying through the apartment as Mom defended me fiercely. "My son is gay and he is loved. If that's a problem, don't call again." Hanging up, she looked at me with tears but also pride. "I've hidden enough in my life. No more." Her strength inspired me, but the rifts in our extended family widened, testing the bonds we were trying to rebuild. Noah and I argued late one night about whether to go public with a statement or let it fade. "Hiding again is what got us here," he said, frustration clear. "I contacted your mom because I believed in facing truth head-on. Don't go back now." His words stung because they were right, yet the fear of further exposure paralyzed me. Alex organized a small gathering at his place, a mix of our closest friends, some gay, some straight, to show support. Sitting in his living room with wine and laughter, the camaraderie felt healing. But when one friend asked about Mom's return, the conversation turned deeper. Stories poured out about similar family secrets, betrayals, and eventual acceptance. I watched Noah across the room, his easy smile lighting up the space, and realized how much he had sacrificed already by staying patient through my doubts. The major turning point arrived unexpectedly when Mom pulled me aside later that evening. "There's one more thing your father hid from both of us. In his will, he left a letter addressed to you. I have it with me." She handed me the sealed envelope, yellowed with age. My hands shook as I opened it alone on the balcony later. The words inside confirmed everything and more. Dad's confession of his own hidden struggles, his regret for driving Mom away, and a final plea for me to live openly in ways he never could. The letter ended with, "Forgive me, son. Be the man I was too afraid to be." Tears streamed down my face as Noah found me there, wrapping his arms around me without a word. The truth had finally set me free, but the emotional cost was immense. Decisions had to be made now. Whether to share the letter publicly, how to move forward at work, and most importantly, how to fully accept myself without the shadows of the past. As we stood together under the city stars, the path ahead felt clearer, though still filled with challenges. Growth wasn't painless, but in Noah's embrace and Mom's quiet presence, I found the courage to keep walking. The letter from Dad changed everything in ways I couldn't have predicted. I read it again the next morning at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows as Mom prepared breakfast quietly. Noah sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, offering silent strength. The confession inside wasn't just about regret. It was a roadmap of fear that mirrored my own journey. Dad had written about nights he spent questioning his identity in secret, how the church and small-town expectations had trapped him, and how seeing me come out had forced him to confront the very thing he had denied. "I pushed you because I couldn't face myself," he had scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Don't make my mistake." Mom watched me fold the letter carefully. "He gave it to me before I left, to mail when the time was right. I held on to it all these years because I wasn't sure you were ready. Now you are." Her voice carried the weight of 15 years of silence, a sacrifice that had cost her a relationship with her only son. I stood and hugged her, the embrace feeling like the bridge we had been building since the airport. Noah joined us, turning the moment into something whole, 3 people connected by pain and now by healing. Yet the psychological aftermath hit hard. Sleep evaded me that night as I replayed every harsh word from Dad, every hidden glance, realizing how much of my self-doubt had been inherited. Work called the following day with an unexpected twist. My boss, after hearing about the leave suggestion, had a change of heart. "The company is reviewing its policies after some internal discussions. We'd like you to stay and help lead a new diversity initiative." The offer felt like a small victory against societal pressure, but it also meant stepping into the spotlight I had avoided for so long. Noah celebrated with me over dinner that evening, his eyes sparkling with pride. "This is your chance to turn the pain into purpose." His support reminded me why our love had survived every test. The romantic connection between us deepened in quiet moments, like the walk we took along the lakefront the next weekend, hands linked openly for the first time since the post went viral. But not everything was smooth. Alex faced backlash from his own circle when word spread that he was defending me publicly. One mutual friend accused him of choosing sides, creating a rift in our friend group that tested his loyalty. "It's worth it," Alex told me over coffee. "You've been my brother since day one. Real friends don't bail when things get real." His words highlighted how friendships could fracture under external weight, yet his steadfastness became another pillar in my growing sense of self. Mom, meanwhile, decided to extend her stay indefinitely. "Iowa was never home after I left," she confessed one evening. "Being here with you and Noah feels right." Her decision brought joy but also new dynamics, like learning to navigate daily life as a family again after so much distance. The climax built slowly but inevitably. A local news station reached out after the online post gained traction, asking for an interview about family acceptance and LGBTQ experiences in the workplace. I agonized over the decision for days, pacing the apartment while Noah and Mom offered perspectives without pressure. "It's your story," Noah said finally. "Whatever you choose, I'm standing beside you." The night before the deadline, I sat with the letter from Dad again, its words echoing like a call to action. The misunderstanding with Noah had long since dissolved into deeper trust, but now the choice was mine alone. I called the station the next morning and agreed. The interview took place in a bright studio downtown, cameras rolling as I spoke about the reunion, the hidden truths, the sacrifices, and the love that had carried me through. Mom and Noah waited in the green room, their presence giving me courage when the questions turned personal. "How does it feel to finally be free?" the reporter asked. I paused, thinking of the journey from that airport hug to this moment. "It feels like coming home to myself." When the segment aired that evening, the response was overwhelming, messages pouring in from strangers and old acquaintances alike. some sharing their own stories of hidden identities and eventual acceptance. Yet the emotional peak came later that night when we returned home. Noah pulled me aside on the balcony, the city humming below us. "I have something to tell you," he said, voice soft but steady. "When I contacted your mom, I was scared too. Not just for you but for us. I thought if you never faced this, our future would always have that shadow. But watching you today, I see the man I fell in love with, stronger than ever." His words unlocked the last piece of doubt in my heart. We kissed under the stars, the moment pure and romantic, filled with the happiness we had fought to reclaim. Mom joined us later, the three of us sharing a quiet toast to new beginnings. The betrayal I had felt, the secrets revealed, the sacrifices made, all culminated in this clarity. I had grown through every decision and its consequence, learning that true acceptance started within. As the days turned into weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. I led the diversity project at work with genuine passion. Mom found a part-time job at a local bookstore, and Noah and I began planning a small trip back to Iowa to scatter some of Dad's ashes in a place of forgiveness. The journey wasn't over, but the major turning point had reshaped our destinies, binding us closer through shared truth. Life in Chicago took on a brighter hue after the interview aired. Colleagues who had once whispered now stopped me in the halls with genuine congratulations, and the diversity initiative I led gained momentum, turning personal pain into real change within the company. Mom thrived in her new routine, her laughter filling the apartment in ways I had missed for decades. She and Noah bonded over shared interests in art and cooking, creating a family dynamic I never imagined possible. Yet the growth I had experienced came with its own quiet reflections. I spent evenings journaling, processing how each misunderstanding had forced me to choose honesty over fear, how Noah's initial decision, though painful, had been the catalyst for healing. One crisp Saturday, we drove to a nearby nature preserve, the four of us including Alex, who had become an even closer friend through the ordeal. The trails were lined with autumn colors, leaves crunching underfoot as we hiked. Alex walked beside me at one point, his voice thoughtful. "Seeing you like this, man, makes me realize how much courage it takes to live openly. I'm proud to stand with you." His words reinforced the value of loyal friendships that had endured the rifts. Noah and Mom walked ahead, their easy conversation drifting back on the breeze, a testament to the acceptance we had all fought for. That evening around a campfire we built at the campsite, the conversation turned deep once more. Mom shared how societal pressures in her small town had kept her silent for years, how she had watched from afar as I navigated college and career alone. "I sacrificed our time together thinking it was the only way to protect you," she said, staring into the flames. "But you taught me that love means showing up, even when it's hard." Noah squeezed my hand across the blanket, his presence a constant reminder of the romantic partnership that had carried us through betrayal and revelation. The psychological consequences of every choice had shaped us, turning scars into strength. As the fire died down and stars filled the sky, Noah stood and pulled me aside to a quiet spot by the lake. The water lapped gently at the shore, reflecting moonlight like scattered diamonds. "Liam, these past weeks have shown me what real commitment looks like," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to just survive the challenges anymore. I want to build a future where we never have to hide again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver band, the metal catching the light. "Will you marry me?" The proposal was unexpected yet perfectly timed, a culmination of every trial we had faced. Tears blurred my vision as I said yes, pulling him into a deep embrace that felt like the happiest moment of my life. Mom and Alex cheered from the campsite when we returned, their joy sealing the circle of acceptance. The weeks that followed were filled with planning and quiet celebrations. We chose a small venue by the lake for the ceremony, inviting only those who had stood by us. Dad's letter found its place in a framed spot on our wall, a reminder of the truth that had set us all free. Mom walked me down the aisle in a simple but beautiful ceremony, her hand steady in mine as she whispered, "You deserve this happiness, son." Noah waited at the altar, handsome in his suit, his green eyes locked on mine with the love that had never wavered. The vows we exchanged spoke of growth through conflict, loyalty through misunderstanding, and the power of choosing truth every day. Life after the wedding settled into a rhythm of shared dreams. I continued my work with renewed purpose. Mom became a regular part of our daily life, and Noah's design business flourished with new clients drawn to his story of resilience. The societal pressures still existed in subtle ways, but we faced them together, stronger for every sacrifice and revelation. Friendships deepened, family bonds healed, and my sense of self stood solid where once it had wavered. The journey from that shocking airport reunion to this place of peace had taught me that actions and their consequences shape who we become, but love and honesty guide the way forward. As I sit here now on our balcony overlooking the city lights, Noah's arm around me and Mom's laughter drifting from inside, I reflect on how far we've come. The hidden truths no longer haunt, they illuminate. The path of self-discovery for men who love men is rarely straight or easy, but it leads to a freedom worth every step. True or false? Family acceptance is the only path to lasting happiness in a gay relationship?